Behind me, the Pałac Pod Blachą here in Warsaw. This is the home of Prince Józef Poniatowski. His home, the place where he had his famous parties, also the War Office. Who was Józef Poniatowski? He was in fact a major figure in Polish history. Patriot, general, Minister of War, sometime Marshal of France. Join me in this episode of Poland Daily History, where we learn more about this remarkable Polish figure. So at the Battle of Leipzig, here we are, Prince Poniatowski, a Marshal of the French Empire, the Battle of Leipzig, in the aftermath of which he was effectively, he died.
He died. He was wounded several times that day. He received 4 shots. I mean, it was counted because. You have wounds when his body was found in the Elster.
Because he drowned in the Elster.
He jumped on the. He was probably mortally wounded at that time.
Yes.
And added to the fact that that he was weakened, I mean, he drowned very quickly. But he refused to give up the place, give up the battle.
So
unlike the Bavarians who treated Napoleon in that very battle.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, so he sort of died, I suppose, for a soldier, he died a hero's death on the battlefield.
For him, it was, I say that for him, in a sense, it was good that he died at that time. I mean, because he didn't have to decide in the aftermath whether to be loyal to the Russians, what to do. I mean, no problems of that type.
And if we just
because some of the Napoleonic, many of the Napoleonic generals, officers, started military service in the Russian army. I mean, they are not to be blamed completely, because if you are a soldier, that's your profession. I mean, what can you do?
Well, exactly, and at that time particularly, the concept of mercenary armies hadn't died out. I mean, it was a slightly different approach to.
Despite the fact that the Polish army during the so-called constitutional period, 1815, 1830, so till the November uprising, it's called the constitutional period because the constitution was followed, was obeyed by the of course with some exceptions, but generally the constitution was in force. So we call this period the constitutional period. In that time, the Polish army was called the Polish army.
Yes, so that's interesting.
So, it wasn't just the Polish corps of the Russian army, but it was the name was preserved. In fact, that was the only aspect of the Polish political life during the Duchy of Warsaw where the name Poland was used. That was the Polish army, Wojsko Polskie. Księstwo Warszawskie, no allusion to Poland, because some say that Napoleon didn't want to infuriate the Tsar to use the name Poland, and that's why he chose Duchy of Warsaw, which historically doesn't have any sense. There was no such thing as Duchy of Warsaw.
No, never. Just purely. Well, of course, at that time, Napoleon did sort of go around creating a few sort of states which had no sort of historical basis. and normally putting members of his family in charge, which had limited success. But I was just wondering, now we've reached this point, the death of Poniatowski, as a historian, I mean, how would you sum up Poniatowski's sort of life and contribution to sort of Poland and Polish history and understanding of Poland?
To me, Prince Józef is the central figure of the Polish 19th century, but not the 19th century taken literally, 1800, but the so-called Polish 19th century, so the time of partitions, because he represents the pro-Western option of our political dreams. And he represents those values who are dear to Poles, Poles who are a nation which was born in a constant struggle against Russians, Turks, Swedes. I mean,
of course, yeah.
It's not. I mean. We are not a Protestant nation for which such values as industry, merchandise are important. For us,
it's spirit
and honor which are important.
I think it's probably just worth mentioning is that the order, which is still the highest order of Polish awards today, the Virtuti Militari, was in fact instigated, and the first recipients were Poniatowski and Kościuszko. I mean, that's quite interesting. So he embodied this military spirit.
Exactly, a very, very good point. Yeah, we didn't mention the Virtuti Militari, the oldest military, the Polish oldest military award.
And the most prominent one, of course, and the most prestigious.
I mean, there were guys who didn't deserve that. Brezhnev, for example, didn't deserve Virtuti Militari.
Well, I think every once you allow politicians to start doling out honours, you get all sorts of. I mean, our own Queen at one point was forced to bestow an honour on Ceausescu, which was hastily revoked once he was dead, which rather, that's a different thing. And of course, we have this marvellous, it's a reproduction, we have this marvellous statue of Prince Józef Poniatowski here in the centre, outside the presidential palace. So
that's not the original place.
No, yes, it was the original place in front of the Saxon palace.
Which is now absent.
Which is now absent, as is the whole palace, of course, yes. But it's a marvellous, it's one of these great, typical
he looks like
monument.
He looks like a Roman leader.
Exactly, with his hand outstretched, with his sword on this magnificent
pointing out the direction where to go.
Exactly.
It's also very symbolical.
And there it is here today in modern Poland, outside the President's Palace. This is the historical figure, actually. We're greeted with Józef Poniatowski.
Yeah, it is important. If somebody's statue stands in front of the presidential palace, it means that they are important for our Polish history.
Exactly, and it's remarkable, and it just underlines your point about him being in the 19th century this sort of symbol, this Polish figure, whom everybody remembers. But I think that's actually a marvellous point at which to end. To think, well, here we are. Even today, he is with us.
Funny thing. For Poles, for many years, the one who represented the Napoleonic period in Poland wasn't Napoleon himself. Napoleon is less interesting for Poles than Prince Józef.
Of course.
The first real academic biography of Napoleon in Polish was written in the 60s, 70s.